If you liked this episode of the Hockey IQ podcast, please leave a like, a comment, and especially review our podcast. If you truly listened all the way to the end and you're listening to this right now, you enjoyed this episode. Please go and give it a 5-star review. That helps us out more than you know. Thank you so much and look forward to the next one. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on one member of the three team over at Along the Ice, Adam Zlatkus. Adam, good to have you here. Do you have that Boston accent you can whip out?
Not so much. I don't think so. Some people say it's more of a Connecticut accent because that's where we're from. But thanks for having me, Greg, and really excited to talk some hockey.
Yeah, but when you're hanging out in Boston and watching the Patriots, you got to be able to lose some R's every once in a while, right?
I'm the last person to ask for this too. My wife's Brazilian and Portuguese. There's a lot of rolling of things, and I'm not able to do that either. So
Oh man,
I wish. I
a
wish.
lot of R problems, but you solve it by watching a lot of hockey, so you can speak that the best.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I want to drive straight into the goodness of hockey, like the true joy, which obviously brings us to Peter Forsberg. I mean, my favorite player of all time. I know you're an Avs fan. So, what's it about Peter Forsberg that draws in some of us hockey nerds?
That's the way he played the game. When we're growing up, like he was all of our favorite players, I think. Josh, he's the oldest of the three of us, and he wore 21 growing up because of Forsberg. We all kind of became Avs fans, and so he just balances the physicality right with the skill set. And not many people, even though the game back then, right, was super, super chippy, and most people like you had to play some sort of physical game, but he really brought it to people, right? So the reverse hip check, I think, if he didn't start it, he definitely, um, you know, popularized it or took it to another level. And he was also just super smart. He would create passes behind the net where goalies were turning one way and all of a sudden the puck's behind him. I think Hayduk scored like 10 goals one season just from layups from Forsberg. Um, and then you have all of that paired with just that meanness and like this is something I wasn't able to do. I'm not really sure Alex or Josh, but it's really unique when you're able to like flip a switch and just turn into like the meanest person on the ice. And I think Forsberg was able to do that. And you could just tell like he wasn't like the guy that dropped the mitts, but he was probably the most feared player on the ice consistently.
Yeah, I was talking with Rick Nash once, and the guy that I was with asked for advice from Rick Nash, and he's like, "When you step on the ice, become a mean mother effer." Like, turn the switch. Everyone talks about Scott Stevens, like the nicest guy off the ice, but on the ice, obviously, he was not the nicest one. But I love that too about Forsberg. He's got like that mean streak. Like when you're not expecting it, he's making plays. When you're not expecting it, he's hitting you. Like for me, it was always that you got to keep yourself on your toes because you just don't know what's about to happen. He could do a million things, and they're all in your disadvantage.
Right. It's like if you're on your heels, he's gonna dangle you. If you're on your toes, he's gonna give you a reverse hit or like a quick shoulder. Like he would drive the net in a completely unique way. Most people wait for that contact to come to them as they're shielding the puck, like on their backhand. But for him, if he noticed the guy was just about to reach, he would go out of his way to hit him, and then he would get that separation, and then he would go around. Like that, even today, I think that there's things, and that's why we recently did a video on him. It's like there are still things that players could probably learn from his game, um, even with the new rules and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, if you think about player safety, like just initiating contact is a big thing. I've seen so many collarbones from unnecessary contact. It's ridiculous. It's like if you would have just either rolled or thrown like a reverse hit or make that like little jump towards the player where you're at least stunning them a little bit. It's super powerful. The other thing with Forsberg that was way before his time because they used to just do the cycle back in the day. Like I challenge people to go back and watch the late 90s, early 2000s hockey because it's a completely different game. Um, Completely different. You just work down low, pass the point, crash net like consistently. And he was the first one to, from a forward's perspective, go up high in the zone and find these little pockets of space where like he'd be dangling at the point like you'd see now with like a Lane Hudson or Cale Makar. And he was really the first one to kind of go to that space. Like I always just loved how he would think the game a little bit different than everyone else, kind of like Gretzky did with the behind the net, and everyone went low, and then he took it back high and started that process of using the entirety of the offensive zone.
Yeah, I think, and if you just ask the average fan, you may be like, oh yeah, Forsberg, he dominated below the goal line, right? And like he did some crafty stuff where he would come out from behind the net and do that like spinorama shot short side high. But he exposed the whole zone to a point where I'm sure at some point coaches were like, "What the hell are you doing up there?" Right? Forward stay low, defense stay high. Like there's no interchanging. Like that's it. But you noticed like the whole team took it on, or at the bare minimum, the top guys. You all of a sudden started seeing Blake and stuff like that come in low to replace, and maybe that was the first like early indication of a little bit more of like positionless hockey that we see nowadays. But yeah, I think it's like we say this all the time that me and my brothers, we still play hockey, men's league and stuff like that. But there's one tournament we do up in Lake Placid. It's a pond hockey tournament. And we always say, like, oh, it's the cost of doing business. Like, I'm sure once in a while, Forsberg got stripped up there at the blue line. But like the amount of offensive chances he created because he went up there and confusion in the defense far outweighed, I'm sure, that the one or two mistakes that he had. But most players would be like, what if I go up there and I lose the puck? Like I'm going to look like an idiot. And I think a lot of young players could learn from that type of concept. It's like over the long haul, are you going to get more positive results or more negative results? And if it's more positive, you shouldn't be afraid to do it.
Yeah. And well, it's funny how positionless hockey has come to be a thing because there were times, and you can watch in the highlight videos too, where he would go up high and he'd be doing his thing, and the defense is just standing like right next to him. Like his own teammates were
Well, I
right
don't think they
there.
knew what to do in the beginning, right? It's like there were pylons and their feet were locked in at that blue line. I mean, even walking the blue line was like not really a thing. You'd get it and you'd either go D, you'd shoot it, or you dump it in, right? I mean, those are like
Yeah.
your three options.
The reads there are a little more primitive compared to what we have today. Talking about other players that are really fun and everyone should dive into as you're looking into hockey history, the Sedin brothers. Aka the twins, just like Adam and Alex. It's Daniel and Hendrik. Everyone knows about it. So curious from your perspective, if I found that if you like Forsberg, you also really love the Sedin twins. I'm assuming that's true for you too.
Yeah, it was definitely true for us. I mean, we were Avs fans, so when they were playing them, not so much, but in general, like who couldn't enjoy their chemistry. My twin brother Alex and I played together almost all the time, and when coaches would split us up, we were always so confused. It's like we have this additional benefit of this chemistry. Why wouldn't you want to keep that? And I think it's similar to the Sedin twins, except in their case, like they bring it all the way to the NHL, and luckily, the Canucks were smart enough to understand like if you get one, you should take two. Um, but it's just when you know where someone else is on the ice, no matter what, it opens things up so much more. And I think it helped my brother and I be, somewhat successful in hockey just because, instead of having to figure out where four guys are, you just need to figure out where, three guys are because you already know where that other person is. You know which way they're going to be moving. You know that you could send a behind the back pass like semi-blind because you know that he's going to be in that situation. And then just growing up, I mean, how many times do you shoot the puck in the backyard? In our case, we had a rink in our backyard. So how many times do you get to practice things that, two random players wouldn't be able to do? Or even if you're on the same team, you only get to do twice a week. So, um, but Sedin specifically, they, in our eyes, they kind of started this like reverse cycle where they didn't just do the typical motion of along the boards. They would kind of pop out in the middle and they would reverse that spin cycle. And I thought that that was amazing. And then just the quick passes. It's like, Still remember this like 2-on-2 where they must have passed it 3 times within like a 20-foot area, and then all of a sudden it was a one-timer and it was a goal. And it's like these mini micro passes that they seem like that they don't do much, but they do a ton. And if you think about, a team that's doing that today, the Tampa Bay Lightning, I feel like if they could create a one-timer, they do it no matter what. Like Kucherov and Point, a lot of times are passing the puck like 2 feet. But if you could just change the angle a tiny bit, you could turn a defender's ankles, or you could get a goalie that's slightly out of position.
Yeah, and like the Sedin twins, I think were the first ones where you really would see area passes because they would throw like four passes in a row and it wouldn't be like hard tape to tape passes. It'd be just like a little touch into space because they're passing and moving. And I find it hilarious. Like if you go back and watch their rush videos, like them off the rush, it's so ugly because you see everyone like catching them. Like how are they one of the best? Like I want to say it was Daniel or maybe it was Henrik won the scoring title one year, and I'm like they're legitimately slower than everyone, but they're so mentally above and faster than everyone. It's truly amazing. So it wasn't so much about like pure speed. It was like knowing where the space was going to be and throwing a puck to there where the other brother is grabbing it. And like you said, like the micro pass is just like, oh, I just need to get it past the triangle or through the triangle into the space. I don't need to fire it. Like I know when I watch youth hockey, there's a ton of passes that are just so hard, unnecessarily hard. Like and maybe it starts in practice when the coach is freaking out about it. Everyone needs to go hard tape to tape passes when realistically area passes are probably the more useful of the passes rather than the hard tape to tape. There's situations where, yeah, you want to go hard tape to tape, but more often than not, the higher level of the player and the level of play, there's more area passes involved.
Especially when yeah, it's your point. Like when it's not necessary, nothing bothers me more than when like the pass doesn't need to be hard and someone whips it in there and it's like, okay, yeah, if I was a little bit better, maybe I would have handled that, but like it didn't need to be that difficult. And I think the Sedins understood that too. It's like the first purpose of the pass is to get there. The second purpose is to set up that guy in a way that can help him the most. And so if it need like 2-on-1s today, we're actually seeing, we've noticed we're seeing a lot more passes strictly along the ice. Saucers, it's not like they're going away by any means, but they're going through the triangle. And in that case, you want it to kind of go semi-fast. You got to get it through that triangle. And then you also allow that person to kind of face up and shoot. Because when you're making that hard pass, it's usually not a one-timer. But other times it's just not necessary. And so why put that extra burden on the player? You want them to score just as much. So why fire it in there? Sedin's definitely, I think we're a big part of that.
Yeah, I call that concept technical empathy. Like you are giving a pass to a player to set them up for the next thing. Like I think Panarin's a great example. There's no way he hasn't instructed his line mates to put the pass actually on his back foot. So like he's coming down left wing. So normally if you're going to do your traditional like lead the player pass, it's going to go into his backhand. Well, then he's got to make another touch,
Hmm.
which can sometimes expose him, especially to unnecessary contact, where he start getting passes behind him on that back foot, and he's already open to the ice. He's on his forehand. He can make quick boom plays, easy one touches to his teammates. Just the idea of how do you help the next player by your pass? Like, does it need to be hard? Does it need to be soft? Like, there's appropriateness that I think most people don't think about. But if you break it down, the best possess of like, how do I help improve the conditions of the puck? How do I make this easier on my teammate? How do I set them up for success? How do I lead them into the right space? It's something that's not talked about enough of like how to do some of the best passers, not just find the passes, but do it in a way that sets up the player for the next best play.
Exactly. Yeah. You probably know more about this. But it's a concept that we're thinking a lot about at Along the Ice too. It's just like you want to improve the value of the puck more than when you got it. So whatever that is, if you get it in a tough situation, right, that value may be semi-low. Maybe you get the puck on the boards and a guy's right on your back. Your only goal is to try to put it into a space or give it to a guy where they're in less of a tough position than you were. And the flip side of that is you have the puck, say you're a defenseman, right, Greg, and you have absolutely no pressure. And whatever line change, you get to kind of do your own set breakout, you get to build momentum, whatever the case may be. You may have a center kind of swooping down. The last thing you could do is put it into a position where a guy doesn't have full possession. And I kind of get the hard pass up the board. The guy chips it in if you want to get the forecheck going. I'm not the largest fan of that, but nothing bothers me more than when either a defenseman has all the time in the world and they give it up to a guy who doesn't have much time, or even you see a lot of times forwards are working their way back to defensemen. They have limited pressure on them. Maybe they have one guy on their back and they end up giving it to a defenseman and basically skating towards them as well, where one guy could cover two. And you're like, what did you just do there? You just basically passed the puck. You just basically said, I don't want to have to deal with this. And you put the guy in a no-win situation. Sure, the defenseman can make a move, spin out, whatever the case may be, but like you didn't create anything there. You just passed the puck.
What do they call that? Handcuffing your teammate? Like, don't handcuff
Yeah.
them by passing your problem over to them. Or the other one you mentioned about like you're passing the puck too early. Like you need to draw a player in before you pass. Like that's a key concept. I always say it's like playing chess rather than checkers. Like chess, every piece kind of like has a value. So when you're thinking about trade-offs, I'm willing to trade a pawn for the extreme, the queen, right? Like you need to at least do pawn for pawn swaps or queen for queen takes. Drop it and create like, or if you're able to beat a guy, so it's 5-on-4 to a 4-on-3 to a 3-on-2 to a 2-on-1 to a 1-on-0, and boom, now we scored. And too often players pass too early or they pass their problems. Like nope, hot potato, it's yours now, your problem.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't or, like what really grinds my gears. Watching players is like, yeah, we're passing our problems, but we'll like not even look to make a play until we've run out of options. Like we're gonna skate, skate, skate. Oh, I don't have anything. Now I'm gonna look to pass.
Right.
Okay, well now I'm in a terrible situation. So I don't care really. I'm not thinking about my teammate and how do I set them up for success. I'm just thinking like I'm in a bad spot. I can't have this puck anymore, and it just snowballs. And eventually, what it turns into for me is like a ping pong game until someone either gets like a lucky bounce or a power play. And it's
Yeah.
just so awful to watch. But it all starts with the mindset, like fixing all of this starts with the mindset of like, how can I make it easier on my teammates? Maybe I need to make that F2 rush to the net on the rush where now I'm driving back the D and giving space up top for F3 coming in or whatever that may be. Of like, how can I have empathy towards my teammates? So I call it tactical and technical. So we already kind of touched on technical, but like tactical would be like making that run or making that skate drive hard to the net, but now opens up space for a teammate. Or like I want to take my player. So say we're in the offensive zone. I've got a puck. I'm driving that puck. I've got my defender on me, right? He's tracking me around, right? So I'm going to take my player and my puck, and I'm actually going to drive at another player that is guarding a teammate. Well, when you start doing that, what's that player going to do? Like, what would you do if I'm taking a puck and I'm skating at you in the offensive zone, your defensive zone?
It is almost impossible not to try to engage, right? It's a great concept. McKinnon does it all the time. Defense, should you switch? Should you not? In theory, a lot of times it looks like you should switch, but like you also look like an idiot if you don't engage because he's coming right at you.
Yeah, so you're creating like a very purposeful 1-on-2. Like you're taking out two pieces for your one, sacrificing and
Right.
allowing now a teammate to have free space and free range to go wherever they need to go. Like that's genius.
It
Absolute
is,
genius.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sacrificing the queen, I guess, to your example there. But it's yeah, like even back to the Sedin's example, if one of them passed it within a half a second, whoever had just passed it, Daniel or Henrik, they were probably open again. Like that's the thing. Like they didn't just pass and say, like, okay, good, my job's done. It's like as soon as the puck reached its destination, they wanted to be open again. And a lot of times that actually involves stopping. Like if you just generally keep on moving in the same direction you were, defenders know that. And I'm a huge fan of momentum. Like we see it a lot in today's game. Even last night, we saw a pretty cool power play goal down the wing from Kyrou. But like in the offensive zone, like if you could make a quick stop and you could get a pass immediately off of that, that's where you could get one timers or you could really open up some space because people would just kind of assume that you're going to their backs are normally towards you if they're covering you. Once you make that pass, of course they're facing you when you have the puck, but once you make that pass, their back's normally towards you. And so if you immediately stop, they take their eye off you for half of a second, all of a sudden you have a ton of space. I felt like the Sedins did that. And McKinnon is definitely the number one guy who creates a one-on-two scenario so he could give it to some other guy like Rantanen, and all of a sudden now he has a ton of space.
Yeah. So there's two concepts I want to just pull out of what you just talked about. One was like the Sedins were the masters of change up speed. Like they may not have had speed, but they are the masters of changing up the speed, whether they're speeding up, slowing down, and being able to find the pockets by always changing the speed. You could never, whenever you were speeding up, they were slowing down. When you were slowing down, they were speeding up. Or like just immediately pass and move. Because the second piece that I wanted to touch on was like they would pass, and when they pass, it's like, oh, now I can move again. Like when you have a puck, players are tracky. They're not just going to let you go into certain areas of the ice. But when you don't have the puck, they have like it's interference. They have to let you go into space, or they're going to make it, try to make it difficult. But really, it's a lot more freedom than if you did have the pucks. Like there's the bonus to passing and passing early because now you can move to better ice with a
Right.
lot easier movement. So I think those two pieces are key of like passing to actually get open again in a better spot rather than having to lug the puck through there, and just the being the masters of changing up space because speed is an asset, but really becomes almost not a little bit like it's just not that valuable unless you're able to change the speed. Like that's the actual skill and the technique is like how do we best change it? And Kucherov's another great example of that.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I do like how you mentioned Kyrou. I do want to dive into that later. I have that written down in our notes for today because that's an interesting one. I was hoping someone would figure this out, and I'm glad that someone finally has. But before we get there, I would like to continue down on like scoring goals because too many coaches and people talk about great defense, and I think we're swinging towards talking about offense and offensive generation, but I don't think we ever talk about it enough because at the end of the day, you can't win a war by digging a foxhole. You got to attack. We got to score goals here.
Yeah.
So the great goal scorers, and I've got a clip of Eichel mentioning it, but I've always felt this way of like goal scorers shoot low. Like most bad guys who are pretty terrible finishers, they'll score a little bit by shooting high, but they're going high so often and they're missing out the fruits of what real goal scorers know, which is you can 100% exploit the goalie in so many ways and create second chances too by shooting low. And I'm pretty sure that's where you guys got your name along the ice.
Yeah, I mean there's nothing to start with like the point of just being cool, right? Like that was why we called it along the ice. Like if you think of all some like any good goal, any dangle, any end to end, a lot of times you see guys end up finishing the play, right? You see a McDavid end to end, just finishing the play along the ice. Whether it's 5-hole or just completely dekes the goalie out of his pants and he had the wide open side. So it's kind of a cool, glossy way to go about things. Um, but yeah, in terms of shooting, like on a serious note, Eichel said it. If Matthews hasn't said it, he knows it. That's for sure. I did a lot of tracking of his shots last year, and a lot of his goals are being scored along the ice or just a couple of feet up. Um, and one interesting thing, yeah, you get the benefit of like a rebound too. You really take an option out of the way, right? Like if you're gonna go for a high corner, right, you could either miss high right if you're going high glove, high right, over the net, or you could score the goal, you could save it, right? Those are kind of your four options. But if you're shooting low, you kind of take one of those like negative options out of there, especially if you're going 5-hole. there's no such thing as missing low. You can't dig the puck under the net, right? And so, yeah, I mean, is that a simplified way of thinking of it? Sure, but I think it's an example of like there's a lot of positive outcomes that could happen um, while trying to do that. And I think a lot of good goal scorers, they understand there's homework to be done before they shoot, and if they do that pre-work, they're going to expose the lower half of the net. And whether that's a slight delay, whether it's a look off, whether it's loading up as if you're going to be shooting high, there are so many ways. And that's what, we at Along the Ice love documenting ways to getting a goalie to think one thing, and then you just slip it 5 hole or you slip it underneath the glove. But I was listening to one of your other podcasts. It is funny how it's a cat and mouse thing, right? We're talking about shooting low now. Who knows if that changes a little bit, but it really does feel like that's where players are scoring, and they're finding new ways to do that too.
I just love like especially for a lefty going from their left to the right, looking at the goalie. So it'd be the goalie's right to left. Like if you put it perfectly off the push foot, the push leg, like it's just like how the hell are you supposed to stop that? Like you have to completely throw your stick and blocker and like weight and balance is a little bit off. Like these are just like the basic physics of movement. Like being able to figure out how to score along the ice is just an absolute crazy thing. And something like for me, if I'm scouting a game and I see someone score from like the dot along the ice, like, oh, that player probably is a student of the game, understands a few things, understands maybe how to fool a goalie out, timing, etc. Like it's just not a natural thing for all the players. Everyone else wants to shoot bar down. But yeah, for me, like I'll even challenge my team sometimes. We'll play 3-on-3 cross ice, and I won't tell the goalies. Like I grab the team and goalies go do your net stuff, whatever you want to do. Like, and then tell the players, I'm like, all right, every goal has to be scored either 6 hole or along the ice. Like you have to score down there. Like anything above that doesn't count. And just
I
getting
love
them in
that.
creative ways of figuring out like how do I open up the goalie? How do I expose? Like where are the actual holes? And for all our coaching nerds out there, is CLAing this, constraints led approach. Like how do we use our ecological dynamics and rules based approaches and goal oriented learning to accomplish this? But it's such a great thing because you watch all the great players. I think Clayton Keller had a great one in preseason where like he's leaning back, like the worst body shape
Oh, I
ever. It looks
saw
like he's
that.
going high and then he goes 5 hole. I think that might have even been an OT winner, but it was just an absolute sweet goal. And I was laughing because there's some shooting coaches out there like Tim Turk talking about, oh, you got to get in the glide phase and then you can do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, he just totally skipped all of that. So maybe it's more about skill variability and the ability to have technical or technique that is more variable and able to capture more rather than this perfect exact thing that we just plug and play with. It's hilarious. But yeah, goal scorer shooting low is a dear, dear thing to my heart. And you have a lot less like 2-on-1s where the puck's getting rimmed out and now we're back checking on a 3-on-2 going the other direction too. Like there's so many
Yeah,
benefits.
there's that benefit too. But yeah, I think for many players, like they think of shooting in a mindset from their own vantage point, right? It's like if I can make my shot just a little bit faster, or if I can make my shot just a little bit more accurate, I'm gonna go bar down. And even if that is low, I'm gonna beat that low glove, or go low block. But at the end of the day, like that's also what goalies are training for, right? And I think players, they're better off figuring out what the current goalie vulnerabilities are and keeping up with how goalies are practicing to save pucks. And if you could reverse engineer that, you're going to find a lot of easy ways to score or seemingly easy, right? It's going to look like, oh, like, why did that work? Um, the Keller ones, like that was so extreme. I didn't even know if it was on purpose for a second, but um, like leaning back is an indication, right? Or sucking the puck in is an indication you're going to go short side. Um, and those type of things, those like general rules that goalies go by to make reads, if you could go against that and do the opposite, you're going to score a lot more goals. And like we did a recent YouTube on Robertson, it's like Jason Robertson on the Stars, because his brother's actually looking really good too on the Leafs. Um, and yeah, Robertson, like you wouldn't categorize him. He's a coach's dream, right, Greg? Like you would love a guy like that. You wouldn't say he has the fastest shot. He definitely doesn't. You wouldn't say he has the quickest hands. He doesn't have this crazy speed. And when he takes the shootouts, it looks like a guy like almost in like men's league just kind of lugging himself up the ice. Like it's like, oh, like this is just a day, another day in the life. And he comes in from that left to right route that you spoke of that we really love and I think is best for lefties right now. And he either shoves it 5 hole before, the goalie could get down because the goalie's afraid to commit that left or their right skate down. Um, and if he waits too long, he'll bring it to the backhand because that left foot isn't ready to kick off. It's all driving off that right foot. It's all driving off that right foot and putting it in a vulnerable position. And then, his third option is, well, if he is going to be ready to kick off that right foot, he's not going to be square to my shot anymore. And so then I'm just going to subtly throw it high glove and he's not going to know what's coming. And now he's one of the best shootout players. Just he took one concept and said, I'm going to drive super deep into it. If I do this, what is the goalie going to typically do? And he gets these goalies into the exact same formation and position every single time. And then he's in the driver's seat.
Well, it's funny because he's an anomaly with his stick. Like I think he has 110 flex stick, and all the rest of the NHLers are like 65 to 85. And he's just got this absolute piece that doesn't move, which it blends into his game well, right? Like it's all
Yeah.
about being quick and at the
Yeah.
right moments, the timing of it. But I like your point here. He obviously does the same route, and I've obviously written on that. Like it, you don't want to be going at the goalie too often. Think about from the goalie's perspective, right? Like if you are going directly, a player's coming directly at you, like that's a dream. I don't have to worry about my lateral movement that much other than exploding when he commits. Like that's fantastic. But when I've got to continuously like shuffle, 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 and I'm committing to edges or I'm having to lay down a pad and now I can't push off that direction very fast, like terrible, terrible position. So rather
Right.
than going at the goalie, he's going completely across. Like he basically comes in, gets to the face-off dot, and then is going to the opposite corner. And now
Right.
you've got to track that.
Yeah.
I can't think from a goalie's perspective because I talked to a lot. My brother was a goalie, and I'm like, I can't think of anything worse. It always cracks me up though when like someone starts that route and then they get to the middle, they go to the slot and then go directly at the goalie. Like, all right, you started it well, but now you've kind of screwed yourself.
Yeah, don't tell that to Zegras though, because that's his route. And there's if you do that and then you reset, I agree, right? Like you take this like crazy route way out left or way out right, and then you come right down the middle. It's like, okay, maybe if you're playing like a 10-year-old kid, he may be off his line now because he moved from one side to the other. But what Zegras will do, he'll go outright. He'll come back to the middle, but he's holding that puck in a load position the entire time. So even though now he's up the middle on the goalie, he's now committed that goalie to locking in that right foot. And if he doesn't, he's going to the backhand very easily. If he does, he's just going to shoot 5 hole. And it's another lefty version of what we were talking about with Robertson, but um, it's these goalies, their feet, like they're always told now, it's like, oh, don't commit too early. And everyone's so pissed off at goalies for, the RVH and going down so early. But then, they get beat along the ice. It's like, I think goalies are in a tough spot right now. It's like they can't do anything right according to the general public. But
You can't have it both ways. I was talking with Mitch Korn on this one. Gary's goalie coach of all time, by the way. He's awesome. And he was like, you can't have it both ways. Like the coach has to make a decision. Like, do you want to get beat up high or do you want to get beat low? Like you can't have it both ways. You can
yeah,
either hold your feet or you can get down early and kick those away. So to your point, like holding the puck in a loaded position is just a good tactic to have in general. Like putting it on, like I call it the hip pocket. Like put the puck in your hip pocket, and now you can always. It's like what is it? The 3-point position in basketball where you can shoot, dribble, or pass.
Yeah.
Same thing in hockey. Like you put in that loaded position and then just let the game unfold. Like if someone commits to you, make the pass. No one does. Keep going, going, going. Evan Rodriguez had a great goal last night in that. Like he just loaded it, let the defense decide what they wanted to do. They both went after the receivers on the 3-on-2 and just left the middle wide open, walks in and shoots blocker high. Like it's such a great tactic. And when I was talking to my brother back in the day, he was like, "Yeah, if someone's coming down and they're holding the puck out in front of them, like what are they going to do? Oh, they're going to deke. Okay, no crap. And
Yeah.
if they put in their hip pocket, then they're probably going to shoot. Well, the NHL is an anomaly. Like you really see the difference in youth hockey, but the NHL, like they're smart enough. They hold it there in that loaded position and then try to wait for the other person to make the first move. And when they do, boom, I've got the opposite ready for you.
Yeah, definitely. And we see that now in I'm still thinking of like 90s shootouts, right? I rewatched the first shootout of all time. I think the Leafs were in it. And it just everything the opposite of everything we've been talking about, like straight at the goalie, they either shot or they deked to the backhand. And the puck was out in front of them practically the whole time until they shot. So it's like, if you want to watch what not to do, you could go back and search, first shootout in the NHL. And those are the opposite of everything we've been talking about.
We've evolved a long way.
Yes.
Yeah, Raquel, I think he was the first one who did it relatively consistently. Um, Before him, oh, who's the Danish player who was just a shootout wizard?
Uh, I'm not
Oh
sure.
man,
It's drawn a blank here. Who is yeah, there was a lefty who always came right to left and UC Jokinen, but he was a little bit later, but he would go low blocker all day, all the time. And then that 1 out of 10, he would do the Forsberg move. I think he popularized that route specifically, but um,
I think maybe it was Bodker. Did he play for the Wings? I feel like that's when I really noticed it was when he was playing with the Wings. It was like the same setup every single time, and then he would just do his three moves, which now Robertson does. So if you're looking for a modern day example, like Robertson's basically doing the same thing.
got it. Okay.
Only Bodker would come in from the other side. So like Panarin would be a good example. Like it would be a righty
Right.
coming in from the left, going right.
Yeah.
I think Robertson's got an interesting one because he's really messing with the ice so much more. Like you said, like being able to shoot on the ice off that push foot. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. All right, moving on because we can stay on this for a long time. Seagrass, Panarin, all those guys that are best at the shootout, they're pretty sweet. But I want to talk about attacking through the hands, like, and then the opposite of this would be like proper ways to back check. So let's start maybe with how do we back check well, and then how do we defeat that back check on the opposite side of this?
Yeah. So this this may be like a hot take or whatnot, but backchecking to me is still an area that if you watch an NHL game, I think that's probably the first place that you could be like, even me, as a fan, we like to consider ourselves at along the ice, analysts. But if you're just a fan of the game or you're growing up and you're trying to get better, you probably could watch an NHL game and you can recognize like a back check that didn't make much sense. Um, and I think the genesis of that is I think back checking a lot of times it's weighted on effort. And Greg, I'm sure you're not coaching this way, but I'm sure a lot of coaches are. It's like get back, get to the hole, find a guy. And it's general sayings, and then it's just basically like skate as hard as you can. And a lot of times I find players end up putting the defenseman in a worse position because they work so hard to get back. And the reason is because so many times on the rush, players aren't trying to go right to the net. They're pulling up. And so, and then they're going to find that late guy. If a player pulls up and you're working as hard as you can, typically you go to the guy that pulls up because he's as close as you can. You're just puck hunting. The issue with that is there's probably a defenseman on that guy that pulled up too. And so now that person he's created a 1-on-2 and he could just softly pass it to the middle of the ice with that third guy coming in. And now there's a 2-on-1 happening, Or if the defenseman was smart enough and pulled off of the guy who curled, there's a gap, and gaps are everything for offense. So you see that time and time again. The Robertson one in the preseason, even though that, no one likes to see someone get hurt, that was almost funny too, pushing a guy to get back. But, it's usually that it's over skating, it's overplaying the puck. And you're better off, in my opinion, just looking over your shoulder, identifying the third guy. The first two guys, the defensemen have them. How many times do you see a guy beat a player one-on-one on a two-on-two? It doesn't happen often, and if it does, that's not your fault anyway. As a forward, you most likely weren't going to get back and steal the puck from him anyway. And so you're better off just looking over your shoulder and saying who's coming in third and gapping up on that person, and let the defenseman kind of handle it from their sides. And I would love to actually hear your opinion on that. I'm sure that that's not necessarily something that all coaches would agree with, but I see it bite people too often because of the pull-up effect and finding the late guy.
Yeah, I agree with you that too often it's just like get back as hard as you can. Um, I think of this also from like limiting offense. Like if you have everyone back, now you've got to go five through however many people they have. Like it just makes it more difficult from the transition standpoint. Like I'm a big fan of the last person back, like almost like the lazy back check. Like if we get beat when we've got four guys back, like Godspeed. Like the odds times that that's going to happen are so few, but the opportunities you get in transition off of that are going to way outweigh the benefit of like getting back hard. So I have no problems with like the strategic back check. Marty St. Louis is like the ultimate G. Like he's the one who did this so well. Like he looks like he's doing the lazy back check, but really he's just strategic. Like I don't need to get back. Like they got 2D, they're going for a change. Like I'm just gonna hang out back here. I'll come back to the zone when I get there. Like we're not in a vulnerable position. Like what's the risk reward here, right? Similar to your
Exactly.
point way earlier. The other point is like, how do we want to back check? Because there's so many rules, particularly in the NHL. So if you're watching NHL, maybe it's just they haven't been filtered out yet. Um, but there are rules. Like, do the D go outside of the dots? Yay or nay? And how does that dictate how you give back pressure? The one thing that we all can go on is like you want to filter back through the middle. Like Joe Pavelski used to do this all the time, where like you'd watch his back checks and everything was right through the center ice dot,
Yeah.
whether he knew he was doing it or not. Like it was just consistent. Because now you can filter out to wherever you need to go, right? Like you can turn to offense really easily. Like you can curl both directions. Like it leaves so much potential for him. And then also when he arrives back, like he's in the middle of the ice. Like where does the opposition want to go? So he's coming back to like the middle of the ice. So in general, you want to filter back to the middle, but then it's the amount of like, what's the rules? Like, do the back checkers go to the puck? Did they go to the middle space? Like, how are we doing this? So at the youth level, you obviously don't want to put these hard and fast in. Maybe just measure some concepts of like, here's how we kind of do this. But the NHL, I guarantee they have rules on the back check. And that's why I love the early NHL stuff. Like it's my favorite time of the year is to watch in November and October before all of the coaching kind of makes it boring.
Yeah.
Like January hockey is some of the worst. The guys are dead tired. The coaches have put so many rules in on everything. Like it's kind of boring and hard. But this time of the year, like everyone's still figuring out, like you can create a lot of stuff that you normally wouldn't be able to create later on. Like there's just a lot of fun to be had. But like for me, when I'm thinking about, like I don't want to give away my playbook, but I'll give away my playbook. Like I like my D to hold the middle. So they're not going outside the dots unless someone's committed a puck and you can go and strip it. Otherwise, just hold the middle. If they want to hang out on the outside, go for it.
Yeah.
So with that, a lot of times, like if you see a player's back checking, you're reading your teammates, or they're coming back hard and they're going to be able to catch the player before the tops of the circles go to the puck. If you're not going to be able to catch them, just filter back to the middle. First player back, center's position, and then wingers. But you can, if everyone's coming back to the middle, it's easier sorts of like, okay, I'm normally right wing. I can go there easier. Like I can switch this off. First guy back obviously gets slot. So there's a lot of rules that go into this. But to your point, like there are so many times when I watch a youth game where they back check so hard, they just put their head down, get back to the D zone, stop, pick their head up, and they're out of position. or like the puck's already in the back of their net because they
Right.
missed getting the right person or they missed the late guy. Like I call that over backchecking. They backchecked so hard they went beyond where they needed to go. Now there's all of this space up top for that third or fourth guy, and
Right.
boom, they find him and it's in the back of the net.
It's yeah, we use a lot of the same terminology, which is great. Yeah, we call it over back checking too. And I think back to the point of like there's, Martin St. Louis, like he understood not when not to come back, and you you have to understand when coming back at a certain pace makes more sense. Again, if that third guy I like your point. Like if you could strip a guy from behind because like you have more momentum than they do, or you're faster than them, totally go for it. But if you're not going to be able to make that play, like there's no reason just to get to the hole to get to the hole. Like then you're just going to be flat-footed. So if you could just match that person's speed, and all that requires is additional shoulder checking, right? Like if the guy's 5 feet behind you, you're in a good spot. If he's 10 feet behind you, you could probably slow down a little bit and get some rest to your point, so you're ready to go if the puck does approach your way. And I think that the issue with going back too fast and over back checking is then you get involved in scenarios that you maybe shouldn't get involved in. And so I like your idea of the two defensemen staying within those dots. And so if it's outside, they don't attack. But if maybe they're not, trained that way, or maybe they just get puck watching. But if they do attack, or say Kucherov, which I see all the time, will kind of stop in that questionable area. He won't be too far wide. He'll make sure he stays somewhat in. That way, he does get the defenseman to get interested. And then a back checker almost always, because it's Kucherov and we got to get back to him, they'll get to the hole. And because he stops, they'll start drifting towards him. They'll start turning, right? And there's only a few times in a game where you really need to stop. And like maybe that's a decent example. It's like, no, don't just turn and start fading towards him, because now it's going to be that 1-on-2 that you don't want. And he could just throw that. I mean, how many times do we see Cooch just throw that really soft sauce right to the middle, and you see like Hedman just like streaming down the alley? Um, but like you probably overworked to get to that point, and then you skated yourself out of position, and that's where like the over back checking term really comes from. Is like you just overcommitted yourself. Um, but maybe to your point, if Kucherov's way off, he's really smart. If he's more off towards the boards, maybe those defensemen don't commit as much, and they could take that guy to the middle, and the back checker could pick up Cooch, who's now flat-footed. But if forwards are smart, they'll stay in the right areas to intrigue multiple players.
If they're smart, you're asking players away from the puck to make decisions and actually play hockey. Like, come on, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't happen. I mean, that just cracks me up because like, how many times do you see players just like switch off? Like, if I'm not guarding the puck, yeah, what am I doing? Like, I have a player on my high school team, like, legitimately will just like lose complete focus. You're like, there is a defensive structure here. Why are you the weak side winger hanging out on the outside hash marks on the opposite side? Like, there's no one over there. We don't have the puck. Like, what are we doing? Just cracks me up so much.
I mean, not everyone likes playing defense, that's for sure. We have a joke in our family too that I'm not sure if you're a lefty or righty, but my twin brother and I, so Alex and I are both lefties, and my older brother's a righty. We always say lefties play better defense than righties do. But well, what are you, lefty or righty?
Righty,
Okay.
righty center. Put me in the middle, coach. I want to be
Uh,
dishing.
No, there's definitely some guys now. You think of like Stone and stuff like that. There's Bergeron even. Obviously, the rule doesn't apply to everyone, but we did a series like a year and a half ago. I think lefties do have some sort of advantage playing defensively because of that top hand being the right hand, usually most players' dominant hand, and you're able to kind of fish a little bit more effectively than righties who, when they have one hand on their stick, it's their left hand, and typically less dominant. So that's where like the theory comes from, but it's obviously not true for everyone. But we like to poke fun at it, that's for sure.
All right, I think it's time to get to the Cairo goal from last night.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
because we've seen the drop on the power play breakout become like the thing.
For sure.
To your point, there's some players like Kale McCarr who will fake the drop and then get the zone. Seamus Casey is another great example of that. What I love here is it's like the concept in soccer of the third man or the third man run. So like you pass it up to someone, they lay it off, and then there's a third person that's way out of the picture, like not been around the ball, who's just sprinting in behind, who's the real threat. But it's super hard to pick up because they're the third man. They're not the one passing, they're not the one receiving, they're off the ball. Or like you've got a striker that drops off the defensive line, takes the D guy with him, and filling in that space is a player from midfield who's just sprinting at full speed, and you're totally, in a terrible position. Now, the NHL, I don't remember seeing it 2 years ago, but I saw it a few times last year. Um, I want to say Heiskanen did something against the Sharks. I forget if he was the passer. I think he was the guy who got a 2-on-1 off of the third man. We'll call it the slingshot here. The
Yeah.
slingshot concept, where Kyrou scored last night in the season opener. The player comes up, I think it was Falk, the D, comes up, does the normal drop. At that point, like everyone normally takes a step to make sure then they've got some back momentum, back flow, and they can still challenge at the lines effectively. So they're not completely flat foot. Well, the problem is if you're going forward and someone's got speed going behind you, you've got some real problems. And now the NHL has figured this one out a little bit. And it's only a matter of time before everyone's got this general concept. And it's fantastic. So D comes up, he drops it back. That person isn't the one ripping with speed, and I'm going to take it in the zone. They're the passer. They're still the quarterback. Meanwhile, there's another player that's sprinting on the outside to get that puck. So they're the third man. They're out of the picture. So you got the drop, that person who's normally the person ripping that would try to get the offensive zone off the carry makes the pass to someone who's just streaking as fast as they can. So you're stepping up, they're going hard. So if you have the chance, game number 1, October 8th, Jordan Kyrou goal. Check out the slingshot. Curious if you've picked this up a lot. I want to say you've seen it a few times now. But this has got to be like the third or fourth time I've seen this finally pay off. And there's no way it's not going to be all over the place now.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of what you said is pretty accurate. We've been tracking this one pretty hard. I called it on our Instagram last year when the Stars did it. I said, my power play entry, of course, it's not like I created this, but I've been begging for a team to get it done successfully. I've seen a lot of teams miss the opportunity. And it's funny, if you watch the game close, you'll see that there's things that they've done in practice and then they don't go to it. And if you look at a player's reaction, they'll get pretty pissed. It's like, we practiced this. And so the first instance I saw someone do this was the St. Louis Blues, and they didn't accomplish it, but I think it was maybe 2.5 years ago, where Krug lugged the puck up the ice, right? The defenseman typically does that, and they send it to the slingshotter, like you said, Greg. Um, what most people expect is that slingshotter, and a lot of times you'll see even Florida, it has almost four guys swooping now at this point. That's the new wave of momentum, and they want that wave of momentum to carry and lug the puck up the ice. If, though, you have someone who sneaks in the third guy to your point behind, they're going to be much further ahead and they're going to catch those defensemen flat footed because they're trying to match their speed for the slingshotter, that last wave who is supposed to usually take the puck into the zone. So Krug did this where he dropped it, and instead of just kind of fading into the distance, he then stretched himself for a breakaway pass, and he was wide open. They were playing the Avs at the time, and all four of the defensemen, the PK unit, stepped up when Krug dropped it, and Krug just snuck in right behind them. They didn't make the pass, so it didn't work. So it's funny now, like maybe 2 years later, the Blues accomplished this. It's a different wrinkle because it wasn't Krug or the defenseman, in this case, Falk, who carried on. He actually did stop, but you had Kyrou. And Greg, isn't it funny? Like the soccer term, it's like third man, he could kind of get lost behind the scenes. How does someone get lost in a hockey rink? Like there's not much space to hide, right? But I truly think Kyrie was like hidden in plain sight because what this concept is doing is that it's manipulating pattern recognition. How many times have PK units seen people drop the puck in and that person lug it in, right? It's that slingshot. Everyone does it now. That's the new power play entry. So when you change that or you do something different, it will always catch someone off guard because it looks like you're doing the exact same thing that you've done 100 times before. So last night, Kyra's just steaming down the right wall. No one's really thinking of him. People are thinking of Thomas, who has the puck. He fires it off to Kyrou, and they actually even set a little bit of a natural pick on the defenseman as well. So clearly a play drawn up. And we've been following this one. There's a lot of new wrinkles, and it's all playing off of momentum. But to your point, this is the fun time of hockey, right? Because those set plays they work in January. Maybe all of these PK coaches are going to be fully aware of it, and they're going to make their own, adjustments to it, and less goals. But for now, it's it's still a pretty new concept, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be stolen. Yeah, it's a fantastic one because you think about like where we've come from in terms of hockey. Like if you found someone flat-footed, you would just chip up behind him and go start a forecheck. Well, that's great, but how can we do this with possession? And finding new creative ways to do this is great. I had a concept of something like this. Again, I'm stealing from soccer. Like, how do you get the third man involved? Like, how do you beat flat-footed? Like, how do you maybe draw a guy out? But this absolutely accomplishes that. I think there's another level of evolution we can, or just maybe just an extra layer of deception that we can put on this. But yeah, I'm excited to see how this evolves. But I'm definitely to write on Kairu. If you have any other clips on, I'll grab the Heiskanen one. But if you have any other ones where this has worked or at least almost worked, I'll take that from you.
Yeah, the last one that almost worked. Yeah, the Stars did against the Avs in the playoffs last year. So that's even better for them. That's impressive. It has to involve deception. The other one didn't have good deception. It didn't work at all. The Bruins tried. So McAvoy lugs the puck up. He passes it back to, I believe it was Pasta. And he just books it straight. McAvoy does right up the rink. He's not skating backwards. He's skating forwards. No deception whatsoever. Like players are probably like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" It's very obvious when all of a sudden a defenseman's just skating as hard as he can up the ice. And so Pasta quickly passes it off to his right. That guy goes for the end boards pass. So the Bruins tried the off the end boards and try to hit McAvoy. The issue is without the deception, it just, ended up being an icing because Florida could see it from a mile away. So you do need to, in that case for McAvoy, he would have been better off skating backwards than he would just booking it forward because why would a defenseman be booking it forward unless he wants the puck, right? So the deception is key on this.
Yes. So you'd mentioned in our pre-notes of something you wanted to talk about, and I'm curious because I didn't follow along quite that well. So I know this is going to be a good one here. Talked about hitching a ride to or hitching ride to best player on the team. Like, what
Yeah.
is that? What is that for you?
So yeah, we recently I told you this in the kind of the pre-calls, like we're moving into one-on-one consultation and um we've been talking about this a lot. And so like who's the best player on your team, right? If you're talking to an individual player. Um and maybe it is that person, right? There's always a chance that there has to be one person, but in many cases you're not going to be that best player. Whether it's on offense or defense. And you see guys in the NHL now that they're adjusting their games to fill a role to be that duo of someone else, right? And so if you think on offense, right? Or actually we could start with defense, right? Devon Taves, is he already a great player? For sure. Did the Islanders get rid of him too early at 100%? But would he be as good as he is today if he didn't potentially adjust his game to play as well as he can with Makar? Probably not. And this idea can be used at any level. If you are the setup guy to the number one scorer on the team, you're now probably going to get the most assists. If you are the defenseman that is going to do some of the dirty work for the offensive defenseman, or are you going to be the offensive defenseman for that, true stay-at-home guy who is, has been on the team for a while and is, logging a ton of minutes? You're going to give yourself more opportunities, you're going to give yourself more ice time, and you're going to get yourself most likely more points. And so if you can adjust, if you can understand what does the best player do really well and what would complement that the best, you're going to fill out a spot for yourself. And hell, if you're always the second best player on your team, you're going to go places, right? So I think I've noticed this recently. Another good example, because we watch the Avs all the time, is Mikko Rantanen. And again, he's the top 10 draft pick. Like clearly this guy has a ton of talent. But do I think he would be practicing some of the things that he's practicing if he wasn't playing with McKinnon? Maybe, but probably not, right? Like we see him doing this like mini hockey stick deflection in and around the net, and he's realized like McKinnon's gonna be the guy with the puck. So I'm gonna work on my one timer. I'm gonna work on my in tight deflections. I'm gonna work on my side of the net deflections, and he's really honed his craft to become, the perfect complement to Nathan McKinnon. Or you think of Getzel. I was looking back at some of his, college stats, and for sure he scored goals, right? But he would get twice as many as assists as he did goals. Very kind of typical stat line for a player. He comes into the NHL. He recognizes, Crosby needs someone at this time. He now is much closer to a kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. I know he's not on the Pens anymore, but again, would Gensel have been a good player in the NHL? Probably. Did he fill a void and become a perfect complement for Crosby? Take his game to the next level, get more minutes, get more confidence, and now, deemed obviously clearly good enough to not even need to play with Crosby. He could go anywhere. He went to Carolina, could kind of drive offense for himself. But, you know, the more minutes you play, the more confidence that you're going to get. How do you get those minutes? Hitch your ride to the best player and see how you can fit in best with them.
Yeah, or just for me, it's like, how do you find a role on a team? Like every team needs someone to do something. Like you just need to figure out how can I be of service? And that's a great concept for life. Like, how can I be of service? How can I help someone? That, that's valuable. And I'll go back to that technical and tactical empathy of like, how can you make it easier on your teammates? How can you make, again, value by doing things for others. So finding what that is super, super important and critical, and will lead you to much success beyond the ice, in your marriages, general relationships, a lot of benefits there. But very excited to dive into a lot of this detail here. That's everything I got on my notes. Is there anything else you think we should talk about, or should we wrap this up?
I think we could wrap it up, but yeah, Greg, thanks for having me. I know both of my brothers are happy that I'm speaking on their behalf, but we truly are a three-man team at Along the Ice, and yeah, we'll stay in touch. You're doing a lot of great work as well, and we're a fan of yours.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Adam. Thanks for coming on. This is a wonderful conversation.
Have a good one.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.